everybody should be able to access their VA benefits in an inclusive and user-friendly and intuitive fashion, and should be able to do so remotely. Not everyone has the same functions. Not everyone has the same abilities. So if we're talking about the VA's website, the VA's apps, they have multiple, and they've done a really good job at improving those. They want to ensure that everybody has better access remotely from all areas, urban, rural, and then regardless of any sort of limitation that makes some things challenging. They want to make sure that those people can access their benefits. They should absolutely be able to do so. I'm really excited today to chat with Tim Hornik, who is the Chief of Staff for the Blinded Veterans Association. If you've ever been frustrated with the VA's suite of apps or the website and maybe thinking it's not intuitive or where do I click here and blah, 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 can you imagine that same level, but having a limited eyesight or being completely blind? I mean, everybody's talking about the cool new VA app, but is it a cool new VA app for everyone? Tim, my man, how are you?
Adam, I'm doing fantastic, and thank you for having me on to be able to talk about what it absolutely means to be in the space of individuals with different types of barriers to being able to access these digital resources and content that the VA produces, because it is a major talking point that we need to have to make sure that everyone, regardless of your situation, is able to interface with these tools in a manner that allows us to be on the same level as our peers who do not have any barriers. So the short story is, well, first off, my disability is I have no functional sight. So while I still do have my eyes, yes, I am on the scope of those that have nothing usable that I can work with visually, which means when I'm interacting with different types of electronic and informational technologies, I'm doing it all through audio type of text-to-speech engine, screen reader, that type of stuff. While deployed on combat operations, had a bad day on mission, so to speak, and that caused my visual impairment. And after that, it was a roller coaster of experiences I had. First off, I was able to stay on active duty for 7 years, working within a unique space of the very few group of totally blind active duty service members in those mid 2000s. And so that provided me with some very unique experiences in how the federal system works and how we need to be successful in self-advocacy and self-reliance. Tools I use to this day after I got out and medically retired in 2011, I've used with the Blind Veteran Association just to help them with advocating for more accessible and usable mediums, which we may interact with the VA, more training content and materials, so that some of the issues that veterans often encounter is just due to inexperience with accessing some of the services. So been using those same tools from my military service through the BVA to this present day, just to make sure that everyone is on that same playing field, that we can access these services and platforms without any barriers.
Approximately how many visually impaired veterans do you think are out there in the country that you support or provide services for?
We definitely know from the VA that they are servicing a little bit over 62,000 blind and visually impaired veterans within their blind rehab services. And the chief of optometry in the VA is indicating that there can be upwards of 1.2 million veterans within this blind and low vision category. More of them are going to be on this low vision side of the spectrum, which means that they may not require audio or text-to-speech engines like I do to interact with these services, but definitely do need to make sure that these platforms have some good contrast, some good visuals that are not too cluttered. And that's just within the blind and visually impaired landscape, without even going into, like many other veterans, like you're indicating, with our different disabilities. A lot of us have a couple of disabilities, not just one.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is where, when we start looking at design principles, really trying to emphasize universal design, so that, say you do have someone that has a visual impairment, and what if they also have a cognitive impairment? So now we're talking about different types of things. So this is where it's more than just what we're able to bring within, our population that we serve directly, as much as it's, this might be our population, but the tools that our population needs extends to other areas, and more importantly, significant portions of the population that we serve also have other things that we need to take in consideration. We have to open up the full umbrella of understanding who our constituents are and what it is that they have to go through in order to resolve access barriers.
So the more equitable and more user-friendly and intuitive a software is, the more accessible and user-friendly it is to everyone. Not only does that make folks enable them and empower them to access their health and benefits easier and with less of a headache, but it also saves VA resources, which are spread so thin at all times. I was thinking about this when I was sending you the invite to this link to the conversation we're having right now. How do you navigate? Like, what does a user-friendly website or app experience look like for you?
I have a fairly advanced set of skill sets that allows me to use a wide variety of screen reading tools. So right now, I'm talking to you on my MacBook Pro. So
Mm-hmm.
that has integrated solutions for accessibility. So VoiceOver is a screen reader, Zoom is the magnifier, and there's a whole lot of other tools that Apple built into their products, which is why that they are called accessible technologies, because
Right.
they are designed with individuals with different needs
Hmm.
already built into the system. On my left, I have my Windows computer that I use for work that has JAWS, that is a screen reader developed by Freedom Scientific, that provides that same screen reader functionality for me to interact with those tools that's within the Windows platform to do this very same things. What I'm able to bring as I'm looking at these type of things is just an awareness on every system is different. Every
Hmm.
individual is different. To go and do that, I might think as a very simple task: open email, click on the link, go through the setup prompts. For a lot of individuals, and this is not just specifically related to blind and low vision individuals, there's a whole variety of individuals that have different experiences and skill sets that they're bringing forward into this digital space, as we are, I don't want to say forcing, but encouraging them to access the services like for VA Healthy Vet, or for benefits, or for travel reimbursements, or those types of things with the VA, through these digital spaces, where clicking on that link is now a major muscle movement. Uh, and it,
Hmm.
once again, has nothing to do with the particular tools as much as it has to do with the individual's experiences at that point to get them to that level so they can start doing this. And once they're able to start interacting, so clicking on the link to go through different prompts to get through the studio, to me, absolutely no problem. Just to go and just give you the quick rundown of what it was nothing more than, like anyone else, digging up the email, because 2 days is a whole lot of emails that occur.
Right.
So yeah, oftentimes using that search feature to go find Adam, oh, there it is. Go ahead, Pat, bring that one up. Then clicking on the link. Once again, using the Mac, it's kind of funny because Safari is my default browser. The Studio is not compatible with Safari, so it's looking over that saying, okay, go over to Chrome. Okay, now it's time to pop over to Chrome, pop that link up there in the search bar
And
to
it's
go
telling
ahead.
you all of this with like a
Oh, yeah.
voice, like a text to speech prompt is telling you.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, all that's coming through. Which, once again, it's like as you're hearing stuff, it's like, wow, that's a lot of steps. But to me, this is simple, maybe 15 or 20 seconds worth of effort for me to
Mm.
go through. And I know y'all with Paragene, with some of the research projects that you guys have worked on, especially when it comes down to Observing veterans being able to access, say, login.gov, which is a GSA product that, you guys directly experience some of the pain that a lot of veterans face with just even clicking in, looking at it, developing that rapport, which is another thing that I don't think we talk about enough is we have to trust these interfaces that we're using. We have to trust that they're coming from the right people, that our information that we're providing is safe and secure.
I had never in a million years would have thought of that. That is, yeah, I suppose if you can't visually confirm, a security certificate or whatever, I suppose it's possible for unscrupulous actors and scammers and predatory folks to try to. I mean, is that a pervasive issue? Folks trying to scam people who are maybe have limitations on their accessibility
Um,
because they can't visually confirm with their own eyes if something looks trustworthy or not.
And I'll remove the accessibility part and just go back over to experiences.
Mm.
You and I have a different tech level experience that understands what it is that we need to look for. We have folks that don't exactly have that same level of tech experience. Now you couple together that with, okay, using some of the access software and systems out there. Okay, how do you find those things? Yeah, there's some differences between doing it visually and doing it with screen readers, but it's still all possible. And both of the solutions I mentioned have some pretty quick ways of being able to check that. So, but still, it's, going back to that experience level piece. I mean, yeah, that is a real thing. I've had many veterans I've spoken with over the last 6 months since I've been with the BVA about this issue in particular. And when I was working for the VA for a couple of years before that in a couple of roles, it was super real on just some of the questions when I would try to get someone to use secure messaging to send me a note as a clinician or to just communicate findings. It's a real thing, and it's not limited to those of us that have some form of access barrier, but it's a bigger issue that's based on experiences.
How recent of a technology is technological advancement is this? Like 10 years ago with one of the early iterations of e-benefits, was it even possible to navigate it?
It's been a roller coaster ride, to say the least. Well, first off, federal systems are usually behind current trends when it comes down to development. So in that earlier 2010s, VA was very much using Web 1.0 interfaces, which is in layman's terms, talk at you. So
Right.
those types of sites are pretty easy to interact with because there's not a whole lot of back and forth. It's read, click link, read, click link. Occasionally you get to submit something.
Got it. So that was almost more accessible in the Web 1 world, but then not as much once things started to quote unquote advance a little bit.
Yeah, things did become a little more tricky. We had a lot more service lines, clinics, and other folks developing their own content on VA websites, which, okay, the VA accessibility team is a small team. The Section 508 office, which if you ever need to contact them, yeah, it's section 508 at va.gov. Great folks to talk to.
Mhm.
They're just a small office, and their job is only for remediation. So this means after someone publishes something, they only know about something's being broken until someone tells them. They
Right,
don't
right.
have the tools. Well, they don't have the full capacity to be fully checking everything on a regular basis. And the VA, we're talking 4 different administrations within the VA. We're talking how many VA hospitals, how many VBA regional office, how many clinics, how many. I mean, we're talking. You start breaking down the minutia of it, and you understand that the VA web presence is expansive because each one of those units has their own little. It's hard to go and place everything on their shoulders,
Right.
which is what's happened between the 2010s, much of the 2020s. Fortunately, around 2000. Between 2012, 2014-ish, we had digital services come on and the ad hoc teams as part of that executive directive to start making these more accessible, which comes down from some of those federal accessibility congressional packages to just
Hmm.
start doing that. So we started seeing more emphasis. So 2016 is when I know digital services and the ad hoc teams. And I think that's when you guys with Paragene started coming on board with being to actually look at this roller coaster that we were on with VA web development. I remember signing up for those very, very early test pilot beta va.gov websites at that time and being a part of those studies. And it was cool to see what was being thought of, how accessibility was being fixed, and more importantly, being told that we understand that this part's broke, we're fixing it, tell us how. So being able to have that two-way communications, that still took another 4 years, and mainly thanks to the VA Web Accessibility Act in 2019 that the VVA championed, where we able to start seeing the major changes that I would like to say started to occur in 2020, separate from COVID, but thank God it occurred
Hmm.
alongside COVID when we started moving everything to virtual, where we got to see a lot more of that Web 2.0 type stuff really come into its heyday for being very, very usable and accessible, like you were saying, that there's been a lot of progress, especially over these last 3 years, with making these platforms a lot more usable. But definitely early on, it was a little bit easier just because it was a more basic type interface. Once you start bolting on a lot of the web apps and a lot of the other software packages that the VA uses, that's when things get tricky. But at least fortunately, I think we're at the point right now where we're starting to see those things evolve into a very, very good, not barrier free, but definitely a better system of catching the barriers that people encounter and getting them remediated in a very expeditious manner, regardless if it's a website, app, or whatever. We're seeing changes occur a lot faster nowadays.
And that's something that the VA has done a really admirable job with, especially recently, and the work that they're doing through these veteran usability studies to collect user experience feedback. Because I mean, they don't somebody who is sighted
Mhm.
would not know that something is wrong for someone who is not unless they talk to them, and they're like the way that they're aggressively going out and trying to seek that feedback and making rapid improvements, not I hear people use the phrase speed of government, sort of changes, like actually making changes in a more expeditious than is typical fashion has been really
Yeah.
impressive. For yourself or for the people who you represent, what are some common threads that you maybe have heard about or have noticed when it comes to accessing benefits in healthcare that you think still could use to be improved?
We're still having some usability issues. VA.gov main web page and basically all the other VA web pages, they all have the same header. Within that header, for those of us who are using screen readers, we often use heading navigations to get through those. And it's a simple thing, heading level. So if you think of an outline, heading level 1 should be your title, heading level 2 should be like a subtitle or something below that. Heading level 3 is when you start getting into content. And they flow in a very sequential order, but
Right.
usage of those headings should be appropriate. So if you're accessing like va.gov and trying to get through the headings part of any of the web pages, it becomes kind of interesting because heading level 1 is going to be va.gov. And then when I was doing this in a live demonstration while talking with the 508 and digital service and ad hoc teams, I ended up counting one heading level 1, then we went over to 16 heading level 2s. So this is even before we get into the website, where all of a sudden it's like you just get this onslaught of
Mhm.
every single element in that menu bar was a heading level 2. Did all of that need to be there? No, it's actually several of them were duplicates of it, where you get through them and then all of a sudden you're hitting a second batch of them because I don't know if there's a sub menu structure there, but once again, it's you get through that before you actually find the body of the content, which hey, that's a whole lot of information just for an individual to process. And,
Just to
simple,
decide where to go
yeah,
in the first place. Yeah.
yeah, because simply just going to the next heading level one does not exactly bring you over to the body of that web page.
Mm,
That's usually going to be like another heading level two or heading level three.
right.
So, and as you're still going through that, you find yourself automatically in that bottom footer without realizing that you skipped over the main body of your web page that you just went through. Looking at WCAG, which is the Web Consortium Accessibility Guidelines, which is what Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act suggests that all federal sites use, that is accessible. That meets all their appropriate guidelines of heading level structure in appropriate order, but it's taken it to the level where it's this is unusable now because we can't figure out what's actually the important pieces that we need because everything looks the same. It's like
Mm,
getting the good example on what I know folks that have vision might use is when you encounter a wall of text, it's that same thing. That's what we're experiencing as we're using the screen readers. We get that wall of text in audio format instead of visual format. So it's trying to pick out where we need to go within that huge group of information that we're reading because it's not structured in a way that is meaningful for us.
hmm. It's kind of like getting an email that's just one giant paragraph that should be five separate bullet points slash paragraphs. And I don't know about you, but when I see that, it's like, okay, where's the big line here? Where are the bullet points? Like, let's get to business. A lot of times I skip an email like that and save it for later. you know? uh,
You're right. And to make it worse, it's like, hey, now that one paragraph that you just described, it's one run on sentence. It's not
right.
even separate sentences. It's one long run-on sentence and that's what we're experiencing oftentimes. Once again, accessible, yes. Usable, no, not really.
And so
But
so what would you like to see in the future? Like what are some things that you're advocating for either personally or with BVA? Uh like what's your big push right now?
so twofold is once again looking at make things usable and training. So usability. I know Perigene, you guys are doing a great job with trying to bring this up to light. BVA, we're in direct communications on a very regular basis with the digital services and Section 508 teams and a few other folks that are the ones that develop VA's websites and apps just to make sure that our voices are being heard, that they're developing for our particular needs, as well as being receptive to suggestions that we have. So we are seeing those things, but I still like to see more advancements within the usability of these types of digital platforms that we're using. And then when I look at specifically like the app, it's one that question I keep tossing over to the folks that I talk to that's working within the VA Health and Benefits app in particular is what is the mission of that app? Because we don't want to make something that becomes too cumbersome because it
Mm,
is a nice app. It is very useful. I can't encourage folks enough to get it onto their smartphones and tablets because it is a lot of information at your fingertips that it is very digestible. It's very consumable. It provides a lot of good quick access to our benefits, to healthcare, secure messaging, letters. I mean, I can't promote the app enough.
oh,
However,
it's great. I mean,
yeah,
you're referring to the new VA Health and Benefits app, right?
yeah,
Yeah, oh,
yeah,
it's great. And it's getting
yeah,
better too. Like every yeah.
it is. But what I don't want to see is all of a sudden them starting to take some of the other VAF properties and
Mm,
bolting it onto it because what we know within research related to tech usage is if something takes more than 3 to 5 clicks, you lost someone. Same thing on apps. If it's taking you more than 3 to 5 taps to get to where you're going, you're losing them. So it's almost like we need to keep some things in this type of neat and tidy sphere where as much as we love to bring on more tools for it, let's be very strategic about what tools. So the questions that I keep using is, are you making this as an administrative tool for veterans to access their VA information? Are you making this a benefits tool or are you making this a clinical tool? because those
Mhm.
are all three separate tools that have different components and different strategies. What we need to do just administratively, which a lot of people think some of the clinical and benefits things are administrative. They're administrative to us, but on the VA side, as a former VA employee, I can say that definition of administrative differs between
Mm.
each of those parts of the VA, and this is where different tools come into play. So my focus is make sure things stay usable, like with the website example for va.gov in the headers, making sure that it's you could streamline, you could strip away some of those items, and it helps me as a blind person, but it also helps individuals that might have a cognitive issue where that's a lot of information for them to process. They don't exactly know where to go through because they might lose their way through it. And so stripping away, simplifying some of those things, that would be great. Training side, it's one thing that I know you and I have spoken about that I'm interested to go and see, is that a lot of these systems, there's a lot there, but there's not a lot that's out there training us as end users of these portals, services, websites, apps, so then we can use them to their fullest extent. And that's one thing that I would love to see change. And one thing that I know, as I said, you and I have spoken with, I talk about it on a regular basis with the teams developing these tools for the VA, as well as, since we're focused on blindness, I've asked blind rehab services many times to step up and to get involved with these communications with these teams and us, so then we can develop appropriate training tools and solutions, so then veterans, trainers of the blind, and other individuals that do rehab training could come in, watch a short tutorial on how to use it or how to teach someone to use it, so then we can use it. Because that goes back to that conversation that we had before about rapport. We can only develop someone's rapport if they know how to use it. We tell someone, here it is, go use it, good luck. That's not developing trust in the system, because they need to first get over the piece of, is this the right system? We
Mm.
develop the appropriate training mechanisms and tools that allows them to use it. Then, okay, they know what to follow. They have a script, they have a route that they can look at and be like, okay, so this is the right thing. Here's how I need to interact with it. So all those things related to usability, rapport begins to break down rather quickly, because that information is out there. Unfortunately, I've kind of been stonewalled a couple of times. We're trying to get this, because it comes down to a matter on the VA side of who's going to do it, who wants to come alongside to
Yeah.
help develop these types of tools. The favorite thing is, whose responsibility is it? And the digital services team, headed up by Martha, Pat Sheehan's 508 team, they all want this done. It's just we need assistance from other components of the VA to come on board to really help us out with this, to really make this come to reality, because it's going to be something that requires multiple entities coming together to develop the right set of training tools, materials that, again, staff and end users can use alike.
Right. And when you say training, you're referring to not only training folks who are newly visually impaired, because obviously there's a lot of life that needs to be reframed,
Mhm.
and approached from a different way, I would assume, but also training folks to help facilitate and train
Yes.
people who are newly visually impaired. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct. And this role put on my formal role when I was working in the VA within one of the VA blind rehab centers, is that I had staff come up to me and say that they didn't know how to use, like, Healthy Vet. They didn't know how to work veterans through it. Most of them still, they don't have the time to develop training for themselves. They don't have just because their clinical time is so packed every day, that they don't have that extra time in the day to go into these systems and check them out. And especially if you're a staff member that don't have your own internal credentials because you're a veteran, you can't really access those areas to see what it takes to get into them to develop the training scripts and materials, because you can't access them yourself, which is why it needs to come from someone a higher level than our frontline VA clinicians, because again, they just don't have the time to do it.
Right.
However, higher levels of the VA, they have that ability to reach across a wider span of individuals and service lines to come together to create the materials so that the frontline staff has something to go off of, so they can provide better training to veterans about how to use them, which once again resolves some of the issues that we already spoke about.
I can't even imagine. I mean, I've been frustrated with my healthy vet before. I've been frustrated with some of the, as the VA rapidly makes improvements. It's not perfect right now, but I've been frustrated with the login process. I've been frustrated with trying to find what I'm looking for. I mean, add to that, imagine if you have a visual impairment. Imagine if you have a physical impairment where using a mouse or typing is difficult, or a cognitive impairment where, you can get information overload. Imagine just not being tech savvy at all. Imagine, your American Legion VFW generation, your Vietnam veterans, your pre Desert Storm, Desert Shield era veterans who may be a little less comfortable with technology. You add all those things together and you have a downright unusable experience for some people who may need it most.
Yeah. Yeah.
Man alive.
And I like how I just ended up with just talking about that experience level, because that's where I like to start these conversations. Is what's the initial experience level with using these systems in the first place? Because we need to start there before we start bolting on a lot of the accessibility items. Because we'll see that if we fix it for experience levels to make it usable for everyone, regardless of your experience levels, we'll see that some of the bigger pieces on accessibility barriers become resolved rather quickly. Because once again, it's universal design principles. It is kind of more shaped like a pyramid, where experience is at the bottom of that pyramid. So you resolve that foundational level, you're going to see a lot of those other things kind of have that good trickle up effect of being fixed rather quickly because you did it right in the first place.
Absolutely. Man, this is Tim, this has been really educational for me. Really happy to be supporting the work that you do, and appreciate your voice in ensuring the equity of access to these very important benefits.
The VA has made some great strides. The partnerships that the VA has established over the last couple of years, I know with really leveraging Paragene's research and coming over to like the Blind Veteran Associations and asking us for our input and participating on not monthly meetings. It started off as monthly meetings, but we're meeting on sometimes weekly basis, bi-weekly basis to talk about these issues. I mean, this is where we're seeing a lot of these situations getting resolved, because VA, they are trying to do the right things. They're having the right players. They're doing the right things. On a standpoint that us on the BVA side would like to see, we would love to see them actually create a chief accessibility officer, because
Right
that's one
on, yeah.
thing that's missing in this whole picture. Is we have so many different components of accessibility, but no single entity directly responsible for VA's accessibility. And so it's like, who do we turn to at that higher level within the VA that could bring together the stuff that we talked about to resolve the report, to resolve the experiential, to resolve the multiple disabilities that's coming into the picture? VA doesn't have anyone. I mean, Mr. Delaney has been absolutely fantastic as the chief IT officer in the VA, and absolutely respect everything that he has done. It's just he's not the chief accessibility officer. He's
Right.
chief of information and technologies and security. So that piece needs to come into play. And so far we're talking about this from a external stakeholder looking in at the VA. This is without talking about accessibility and usability of the VA for those inside of the VA, the
Right.
staff, the employees, even volunteers, because I'll say their troubles are real. That does exist.
Mm-hmm.
And the solutions are not as easy as they are for us on the outside because we have limited set of systems that we're interacting with, and the internal stakeholders, they have a lot more that they have to contend with. So I just like to bring that up, that as we're thinking about this from external, we also need to be mindful that imagine experiences that we're having, folks inside the VA are having the same experiences.
Absolutely. If you could wave a magic wand and put anyone in a brand new chief accessibility officer position at the VA, who or what kind of person would you want? What is an ideal person for that role?
It's someone that's going to have to understand that accessibility goes beyond simple barriers that folks aren't counting, that it goes down to the usability and experiential aspect of it, of interacting with the VA, whether it's a physical environment, whether it's the digital or virtual environment, understanding that when we come into the VA looking for services or trying to request assistance or accessing our various benefits, understanding that every step in that process has to be accounted for, has to be acknowledged. And it's just something that, as I say, it goes beyond IT. It
Right.
goes into that realm of what is that veteran's experience? Because ultimately, that's the accessibility that I would like to see us driving to, is making it not just an IT talking point as much as it becomes a bigger, what's the veteran's experience talking point, which is where it's hard to go and describe it. I mean, if we look at chief accessibility officers at other organizations, I mean, they are in charge of so many different components of
Mm.
operations that they may not have direct ability to go and touch every single service line aspect of that organizational structure, but at least they can go and say, look, there's an issue here. Can we pull resources from these two other areas to help this out, because they're all interconnected? So it's having that ability of being able to work across the divisions, which makes it very hard in the VA because, once again, we have several different administrations under the VA. And
It's a big machine. They got a lot of responsibility. It's a huge machine.
it is. So where do you place that individual and
Right.
what's going to take? I mean, that's
So when you talk about the concern you have with this VA app, the new VA Health and Benefits app, and a lot of people are talking about, like, well, travel reimbursements are going to be there. My Healthy Vet stuff is eventually going to be there. That's going to be the one-stop shop for you. Seeing the one-stop shop option makes you nervous because you'd rather see specialized apps, separate things. Is that
um, those items that you just mentioned. I do put under that sphere of administrative.
got it? Okay.
So first off, thanks for bringing up the BTSSS for travel reimbursements. Right now, that portal for blinded veterans, it has critical failures where we
A
cannot
nightmare, I
access
hear.
it. Yeah, I mean, it's more than a nightmare. It is inaccessible to the purest definition of digital accessibility, that it is completely inaccessible. It's been verified by the Section 508 team to have several critical flaws that prevents us as blind individuals with screen readers and magnifiers to even be able to access it in the first place. So when I learned that VA, after they finished doing the check-in process, so you can automatically check into your appointments from the VA Health and Benefits app,
Mhm.
and after they continued doing the soft launch for the pharmacy, that their next piece is going to be the travel reimbursement. These, I looked at all basic administrative functions that we need to access and have quick, easy tools to use in order to do them, because they are important to us. I've known blind veterans that, you know, they have to take their Uber or Lyft or other type of transit service to get over to the VA.
Yeah.
And these can be anywhere from 30 to, I know a person that pays $100 per trip.
Wow, my
That,
goodness.
and so round trip, double it.
Adds
They're
up.
not, it does. And they cannot put in for that reimbursement, or the only way that they can is by relying on other individuals helping them put that in, because one, we can't fill out paper forms. I don't know what about blindness and filling out papers just doesn't work together, man, but we're not filling out a paper form. Let me tell you that much
Right,
right
right.
now.
Tim Hornik, everybody, Chief of Staff for Blind and Veterans Association. Folks, if you want to help to improve the equity of accessibility, improve the accessibility and the user friendliness and the intuitiveness of the VA suite of digital apps, that is their websites, that is their applications on mobile devices, and everything in between, they're looking for your feedback. If you go to Veteran Usability, .us, you can participate in paid feedback sessions. Yes, they pay you to participate and to provide feedback so they can take your input and make necessary improvements that helps thousands of veterans and their families and their caregivers, surviving dependents, all of those folks to improve that user experience. So if you are a veteran, if you are a current service member, if you're a military spouse, if you're a surviving dependent, they want to hear from caregivers too. If you're a caregiver, please go to veteranusability.us and participate in some of these paid facilitated studies. It is a real thing. You can check out the VA contract numbers, the federal contract numbers. I'm going to put them right here. And then you can check out the website here. I'm going to put it right. I'm going to put it right. Let's see, there. And yeah, appreciate everybody for tuning in.